morning to all the participants joining us from US. Welcome to this international online webinar, which is being conducted jointly by Gautam Buddha University, Greater Noida, Howard University, Washington, DC, USA, and Association of Indian University, along with Haryana Higher Education Council, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra, Swadeshi Swavalamban Nyas, and Campaign for Universal Access to Vaccines and Medicines. On behalf of the organizers, I, Professor Somnath Sachdeva, Vice Chancellor, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra, welcome all the dignitaries, distinguished expert speakers, and all the esteemed participants to this international webinar on strategies for dealing with pandemic for equitable access to vaccines. Now I call upon Professor Pankaj Mittal, who is Secretary General, Association of Indian Universities, to please deliver her welcome address. May I request Professor Mittal, please. Professor Pankaj Mittal, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor Sachdeva. My mic was mute, therefore I was not able to speak. So thank you very much. And a very good evening to everybody. Namaskar, pranam, and welcome to the webinar on strategies for dealing with pandemic for equitable access to vaccines. The webinar is organized by Howard University, Washington, DC, Gautam Buddha University, Association of Indian Universities, Haryana Higher Education Council, Kurukshetra University, Swadeshi Swabhiman Nyas, and Universal Access to Vaccines and Medicines. Today, we have a galaxy of international and national experts to speak to all of you on this very important subject. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Honorable Congressman Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy, member of US House of Representatives, Mr. Ron Somers, former chairman, US-India Business Council, His Excellency, former Ambassador Mr. Pradeep Kapoor, Mr. Pradeep Reddy from Association of Physicians of Indian Origins, Illinois, Professor Marilyn Specole, Chairwoman of Women Ambassadors Association, Miss Ericana Chiombori, former Ambassador of African Union in Washington, Professor Narendra Rustagi, Director CGBS, Howard University, Washington, DC. All of them have been doing a human service to evolve strategies for dealing with COVID. I also have the privilege to welcome Professor Bhagwati Prakash, VC, Gautam Buddha University, Professor B.K. Kutiala, Chairperson, Haryana Higher Education Council, Patent Attorney, Dr. Raj Dave, Professor S.N. Sachdeva, VC, Kurukshetra University, and all the Vice Chancellors, academicians, administrators, teachers, students, and everybody who is present in this webinar. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We all know that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the deaths and severe illness of many people and the disruption of normal lives, loss of jobs, loss of trade, and it has impacted the economies all over the world. It is disheartening to see that more than 165 million people are suffering from COVID-19 world over, and more than 3.5 million died due to COVID-19, and remaining population which is left, except those who are vaccinated against COVID-19, they are living in a perpetual fear of infection because they don't know when they will catch COVID-19. And you will also be surprised to know that 5 wealthy nations of the world plus European Union, they constitute only 13% of the population, but they have placed orders for 50% of the vaccines in the world. In India, we have vaccinated so far about 146 million persons, first dose, that is around 10%, and only about 3% of the Indian population is fully vaccinated. I'm talking about the data of 20th May, that only 3% of the Indian population is fully vaccinated. And the demand for COVID-19 vaccines has been soaring, but the supply has been limited. The accessibility of the COVID-19 vaccinations to the low-income countries has been questioned since most of the vaccines have been reported to be reserved by the wealthy nations. We know that coronavirus does not distinguish between developing or wealthy nation, and hence access to medicines and vaccines should also not be differentiated. Thus, the majority of global mankind feels that the need for equitable access to vaccines and medicines is required to prevent and cure the deadly menace of COVID-19. It is estimated that if rich countries reserve initial vaccine supplies for themselves, twice the number of lives would be lost. There was a lecture by Dr. Guleria who mentioned that 33% of the deaths can be averted if only high-income countries are vaccinated first. That only 33% of the deaths will be averted. But exactly double, about 61% of the deaths can be averted if all are vaccinated with equal distribution, that is, vaccines distributed as per the population. And you know that about 90 countries in the world have access to at least one COVID-19 vaccine. And according to a report by Amnesty International and Oxfam, at least 90% of the people in 67 low-income countries stand little chance of getting vaccinated against COVID-19 in 2021. Means 90% of the people will not be vaccinated in the low-income group countries in 2021, the entire year, due to vaccine hoarding by the wealthy nations. In contrast, the wealthier nations have brought up enough doses to vaccinate their entire population nearly 3 times over by the end of 2021. So you can see the contrast. There 3 times they can vaccinate in the year 2021, and in the poor countries, not even one dose will be available to 90% of the population. The report also says that the Moderna doses and all the Moderna doses and 96% of Pfizer doses have been acquired by rich countries, which represent only 15% of the world's population. And in contrast to this, only 0.3% of the vaccine administered around the world so far had gone to people in low income groups. So the WHO has also suggested that stopping COVID-19 will require at least 70% of the global population to have immunity. So unless 70% of the population has immunity, it cannot be controlled. That is, it says that no one is safe till everyone is safe. Therefore, in keeping with this, an online petition was moved and to raise voice for providing universal access to vaccine against corona, which has been signed by 2 lakh people so far, and which includes about 1,500 vice chancellors and the academicians, and in which 4 appeals have been made. Appeal to WTO for granting relaxation in the provision of TRIPS, appeal to global pharma companies for voluntarily giving patent-free rights, including technology transfer, passcodes, and raw material to other pharma manufacturers, appeal to the government for taking necessary steps, including using its sovereign rights to grant the compulsory license to other pharma manufacturers, and appeal to other concerned individuals and organizations to come forward and facilitate universal access to vaccine and medicines to fight against corona. The webinar today proposes to explore ways to augment the supply of drugs and vaccines for the entire global population, not the only wealthy some. The deliberations shall focus upon issues of patents, TRIPS, right to life, and technologies transfer. So enjoy the webinar. I am sure it will be very, very informative, and you will enjoy the webinar. And once again, I welcome you all to this very, very interesting webinar. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj Mittal. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular international webinar is being arranged with the help of Professor Narendra Rustagi. He is director of the Center for Global Business Studies in the School of Business at Harvard University. He is also editor-in-chief of the Journal of Innovative Education Strategies and managing editor of the Washington Business Research Journal. Now, may I request Professor Rustagi for his introductory address. May I request that please take care of the time. It is 10 minutes only.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you very much for the introduction, and also thank Dr. Pankaj Mittal for introducing the idea behind the conference. We all know, because they are the ones who had higher probability of exposure. In the US, minorities were also disproportionately impacted. During this phase of the pandemic, staying home, wearing masks, social distancing were the ways to stay safe. Last year, the most impact was felt in richer countries. China was the first to come up with a vaccine, followed by European countries, and the US, vaccinations helped in reducing infections, as is clear from the decline in cases in countries that have rolled out vaccination. The variant of the virus that is currently spreading, however, is impacting low-income countries more and is also impacting younger persons. The spread was so much that hospitals in various countries, for example, in India and Brazil, were overwhelmed. The next variant of a future mutant may impact very differently. It is also well known that more the virus spreads, the greater the chance of a deadly mutant evolving. Thus, no one is safe, as Professor Mittal said, and we have to eradicate the virus from the globe. This means that a large portion of the world population would have to be vaccinated. Several countries are producing the vaccine. However, the supply is limited, and because of the high cost, it's also out of reach of a large section of humanity. Thus, starting of the immediate shipment of donated vaccines to countries that cannot afford it would be the right thing to do. In the long run, strategies of waiver of patents, voluntary licensing, compulsory licensing, etc., would have to be explored to facilitate worldwide availability of vaccine. A vaccine may contain components obtained from over a dozen countries, i.e., the supply chain is very complex and fragile. And thus, countries are interdependent. When the pandemic began, it seemed a country could only worry about protecting its own citizens. However, now we know that protecting citizens in a country depends upon protecting persons all over the globe, because more the virus spreads, as I said, the higher the probability of a dangerous mutant evolving. Thus, again, it's in the interest of all of us to vaccinate everyone on the planet. Now to patent protection. The overall objective of patent protection is the advancement of knowledge, and doing so by providing exclusive rights for a short period of time or certain period of time, with the requirement that the inventor discloses the underlying technology. Thus, it's a win-win situation both for the inventor and the society. The inventor obviously would want a long protection as she or he can get, and the society would want to provide this protection for the least length of time. The overarching goal, however, is to benefit the society as a whole. It is with this in mind that various provisions should be explored. For example, compulsory licensing for a patent that has been issued in the country. Thus, all regulations have to be looked at in the context of a reasonable return to the inventor, however, with a focus on benefits to the society. And that is what I want to emphasize. Of course, there are companies that have voluntarily offered to license their knowledge to whoever can produce the vaccine. To emphasize, in the case of coronavirus, since time was of the essence, governments, for example, US, European governments, made significant purchases even before the vaccine was considered safe and approved for use. It's also well known that significant background knowledge was generated on taxpayers' expense through funding of research, for example, mRNA. In such a scenario, what should be the role of pharmaceutical companies, and what should be a reasonable reward for their effort? Again, emphasis is reasonable and the benefit is for the society. How large should such an amount be when governments have made significant payments through grants and vaccine purchases? Have the companies been fairly compensated already? If not, then that's something we look at. If the bulk of money has been paid for by the governments, and since it's now in the interest of the government, realizing that to protect its people, the whole world population needs to be vaccinated, then shouldn't the government find cost-efficient ways of producing as many vaccines as possible, and doing so in the shortest period of time? One such way, obviously, is the waiver of patent and facilitation of technology transfer as needed for efficient production of either parts of the process that can be completed in different parts of the world, or the whole process to countries where the capability to produce exists. The objective of this webinar, thus, is to explore strategies for making vaccines available worldwide with appropriate compensation for pharmaceutical companies. The challenge is, how can all this be achieved? Strategies including waiver of patent, as stated earlier, facilitating technology transfer to manufacture the vaccine, be it complete or part of the process, voluntary licensing, compulsory licensing, exploring alternative medicine to help build immunity, etc., should be explored. In other words, exploring all possibilities to vaccinate everyone on the planet who wants to get vaccinated and to eradicate the virus, and in the short run, explore ways of ramping up production and supplying larger amounts of vaccines at the least possible cost, including those who cannot afford it. It was with this objective that we invited as broad a cross-section as possible of professionals who have looked at challenges created by COVID-19 from various angles. These include medical professionals, business persons, diplomats, authors, educators, and policymakers. And on the last one, no better person than Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, who has introduced the $20 billion NOVID bill to address the challenge of COVID. He stated, this bill will ensure that the virus is eradicated across the globe so that no dangerous variant can occur across, or they can cross into the US borders and deter our own pandemic progress. He would be speaking a little later in the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Narendra Rustagi, for providing us all this kind of information. Next, we move on to our next speaker, Dr. J.A. Jayalal. He is MS, FRCS, PhD in surgery, a professor in Government Medical College Hospital, Tirunelveli. May I request Dr. Jayalal for his address to the webinar, especially we would like that the challenges that are being faced by India, he speaks on these issues as well. Dr. J. Jayalal, please. Dr. Jayalal, please.
Sir, I think अभी join नहीं किया सर.
Okay. Meanwhile, Dr. Jayalal joins us. We move next. We are happy to have with us Dr. Yogendra Malik. He is All India General Secretary, National Medico Organization. He had been a practicing doctor as well. May I call upon Dr. Malik for his address to the gathering? The schedule of the program permits us only 5 to 10 minutes for this. Dr. Yogendra Malik, please.
सर योगेंद्र मलिक से ज्वाइन नहीं किया है अभी।
Okay, we'll come back to Dr. Yogendra Malik in a few minutes when he joins. We are happy to have with us our esteemed Dr. Pradeep Reddy. He is a pediatrician and neonatologist. He is related to Illinois chapter of the American Association of Physicians of Indian origin, who spare their valuable time for social service for the cause of global humanity. The challenges that we have faced during COVID-19, especially during this second wave, they had simply been unprecedented. May I request Dr. Pradeep Reddy to please address the gathering, especially on the challenges of being unprepared. Dr. Pradeep Reddy, please.
Sir, Pradeep Reddy is not here. Sir.
Then before we move next, may I request the controller to please check whether we have Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy with us, whether he has joined us or not so far. Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy.
You can invite Sajin Narayanji. I think he will be there.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Shri Sajin Narayanji. He is former All India President, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh. As we all know, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh is one such organization that is always doing the social work at the grassroots level. We have seen the people suffering during this COVID-19 first wave as well as in the second wave. Shri Sajin Narayanji had been involved in taking up various social issues, including the problems faced by the people during this pandemic. May I request Shri Sajin Narayanji?
Thank you very much. Am I audible right now?
Yes, you are very much audible.
Oh,
you are audible, please.
Thank you very much. Now, we are discussing a very important issue, that is regarding the now it has been accepted by everyone that vaccine is the only long-lasting solution for the pandemic. This has been accepted. Now, when we are living in a capitalist world order, we are confronted with two major issues, that is the stand taken by the rich countries and the stand taken by the pharma companies. These are the two issues related to universal access to vaccines. In a capitalist world order, it permits corporate greed, excess price, profiting, hoarding, etc. It's all nothing strange. So the question comes whether humans or business, which is more important. This issue has come up in many discussions. So along with now regarding vaccine, the people versus vaccine, that issue also has come up. Now new terms have also arisen. When Bill Gates said that the sharing of vaccine technology should not be done, then the word vaccine racism has come up. Then when rich countries wanted a lion's share of these vaccines, then vaccine apartheid, that term also has come up. So in that way, a lot of discussions are going on at the global level. And when most of the businesses are down during the pandemic, now the farmers companies have taken it as an opportunity to harvest money. Two types of making money they are involved. That is, one is grants in billions and billions of dollars by national governments. Second is purchasing orders and pre-orders. These also they are making. And in one company which was loss making for the last several years, Moderna, now they expect billions of dollars of profits. So all their lifelong loss will be compensated by this pandemic. So in that way also they are doing. In the same way, as I already pointed out, some rich countries want to get the lion's share, and very minimal vaccines will be available for the least developed countries. For a country like India can even afford something, but what about the least developed countries? Their thing is very, very, very pitiable. That is the condition. Now, in the midst of all these things, I would like to identify, just to mention 7 issues related to these things. One is in the WTO, whether the waiver of TRIPS can be achieved, because some countries like Germany has already come out. They will not agree to it. Without some countries agreeing, how can WTO come to a decision? Another thing is just sharing the patent rights or formulas or recipes. That will not suffice. So the technology also needs to be transferred. That is another issue. So that issue is there. Another thing is the supply chain side issue. That is the access to raw materials. Access to raw materials also that many of the European countries, rich countries, are already made advanced collection accumulation of raw materials. That also is there. That is scramble for raw materials. That has come up. So our Serum Institute has already raised the issue of supply side. That is also there. So the disruption in the supply chain also is an issue. Another thing is they are talking about a voluntary sharing of these things. But in a greed-based capitalist system, you cannot leave all these things to the mercy of these companies. So there should be an international order where all the developing countries and least developed countries should come together and pressurize the other countries to make a world order where a universal access can be achieved by a equitable system. So, and above all these things, we should get quality vaccines. So if everybody is going to create these vaccines, the quality also needs to be maintained. Otherwise, that also will be a big issue. So along with this, we have to discuss about these TRIPS and other things. Already that issue has come up very well. And a country like in India, the public sector companies also has a great role to play. But unfortunately, they are not well equipped to meet the challenges. So these are some of the issues related to these things. In spite of all these things, if the India and South Africa has already taken the lead, that should comprise most of the countries of the world, and we can, I hope, within a very short span, we can achieve something and bring a new world order. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the brief but very relevant address. In the meanwhile, Dr. J. Jayalal has joined us. Dr. Jayalal, as I already told, he is PhD in surgery and a professor in Government Medical College Hospital, Tirunelveli. May I request Dr. Jayalal ji for his address to the webinar, especially on the challenges that are being faced by the country at the moment. Dr. Jayaralji, please. Dr. Jayalal, you may please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this. I'm extremely thankful for the invitation you are rendered to me to be with you at this very important moment. Every one of us in the medical care field, we are actively involving in the COVID pandemic and COVID care. The equitable access, the term which is becoming a buzzword or the very important bioethical word, which is now echoing in every part of the country and the globe. Within the country, also we are talking about that equitable access concept, and in the globally also that we need to now plan on the equitable access concept. There are various issues. I'm not going to do that every step, but one which we are very rightly we are embarking is on the vaccination. We all realize the globe as a one world, and there cannot be geographical boundaries, and there cannot be the boundaries which can hinder or which can stop the spread of this coronavirus, which has originated or which has started from Wuhan, has swept across the entire continents, entire globe. And no one can say that what they had or the infrastructure or what they had as an superpowers could prevent this virus to enter into that. So if that the enemy or the potential source of the disease, which has the potential to crisscross the geographical borders, crisscross the all man-made barriers, it is also the provisional adoption, which every one of us should see when we are trying to challenge this as a global access or global strategy has to be planned. So there are various steps which we discuss in the containment of this COVID pandemic, and we have experienced that a great loss and devastation with the multiple waves. But we all realize that it is one thing is uniformly true for every country and every nation, and the disease is spreading fast and it is producing havoc in the community. So our challenge also, the response to this challenge also is to be in a unified a global platform. So what is the option in front of us? The only option we could adopt, put lot of boundaries here and there and say that no one can travel here and there and the lockdown. That was only easy option which all of the countries has adopted, and there are restrictions for the people to move from one country to other and within the country, and all the airports were closed, and that was becoming one of the cellular encroachment of our community or our people. But it has only partially helped. It has only or to the minimal it has helped. But now what the option in front of us, we all realize the only hope for us is the vaccination. And if we can have the global access to the vaccination, if we can have equitable access to the vaccination for the entire country and the entire population, and definitely we will be able to overcome the disease, as we all know the concept of the herd immunity and this personal immunity, which is percolating. We know for sure that some of the countries like Israel or some of the countries, even UK, to some extent, they had a close near herd immunity they have reached by the accessibility. But there are umpteen of our countries where they have yet to start the trial on the vaccination, or they are on the pathway of in between that. And a country like India, where we have now crossed 20 crores of the people who are vaccinated, but far below than what we are expecting it to happen. So to do this vaccination to be effectively, we need to have source for the vaccine. The vaccine has to be available. There must be a people to vaccinate must be available. There must be the community participation and community acceptance has to be there. Initially, when there is a vaccine was introduced, and especially in developing countries like India, and there were a lot of hesitancy were there, and we were seeing there's a lot of people were not willing to come forward to the vaccine. So after the perseverance of the government and organization like us, the Indian Medical Association, we all came to the forefront and took the vaccine and showed to the world, and this is comfortable and this is efficacious. So now the vaccine hesitancy is stopped. The people are willing to come and take the vaccine, but we do not have much vaccine to offer them. The source is not there in the hand. And if you look in the whole world, there is production of the vaccine is happening in place, but it needs for the production that we need the knowledge of the vaccine production, raw material for the vaccine production, and the willingness to share with each other so that they will be able to get this vaccination. India realizing this very much, that is why in October 2020 in the WTO that we have raised that concept that along with the South Africa, the proprietary right of the intellectual property right, there must be some provision should be changed that at least for this pandemic, the hassle-free exchange of the knowledge and exchange of the ideas, exchange of the know-how shall be shared with the companies and shall be shared with the countries so that we will be able to have the technological or the knowledge component and also action how component of the vaccine production. Fortunately, today, most of the countries has the infrastructure sufficient enough to produce this vaccine, but they may not have the technological importance on that. And at that time, if there is a country cannot produce a vaccine, then there is a possibility that we need to import the vaccine. Importing the vaccine is also getting into a lot of problem which is happening in this country. So at this concept of intellectual property right, the global intellectual property right has to be settled. And equally within the country. If you take India, we know that is our own technology of the cell culture and taking the vaccination with the inactivated vaccine. This was developed by the Indian-owned company of Bharat Biotech, but it was being produced by only in one laboratory. And the technology is country-owned. The technology is owned by India. But if by the early of January itself, if that technology would have been shared with colleagues or other public sector units which were available, or even to the private units which are available, if the knowledge of that know-how could have been shared, by this time, the production of the vaccine of that particular variety could have been crossed beyond the level of what is needed for the country. But unfortunately, we were holding that, but now there is a little openness is coming into that country. Equally, and when there is a country like Pfizer, when they are or the AstraZeneca, when they are giving that the knowledge or the know-how to produce the vaccine, there are a lot of the side fringes were available, being added, so that what has been produced in this country has to be go out and it will not be able to have been available in this country. So at this point, and it is a call which we all of us has to take, because this is a formidable challenge. The only way in front of us is to vaccinate all our people. And vaccinating at a particular country is not going to give us a safety net, because anyone who is coming out from that neighboring country can definitely again produce the vulnerability of the country to get the disease again. So our perspective, our mindset to be seen that equitable access has to be taken care by the
Dr. Jairal, my humble submission to please take care of the time.
Yeah, thank you very much, and let us work for the equitable access for the vaccine at all possible level.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shah. We are happy to have with us esteemed Dr. Pradeep Reddy. He is a pediatrician and neonatologist. He is related to Illinois chapter of the American Association of Physicians of Indian origin, who spare their valuable time for social service for the cause of global humanity. May I now request Dr. Pradeep Reddy to please deliver his address, especially about the challenges of being unprepared, as we have seen what happened during the second wave in the country. Dr. Pradeep Reddy, please. Dr. Pradeep, please unmute yourself.
Probably he is not there. You may call Satish ji. He is not in the list. Naren ji is saying he has joined, but in the list he is not there. Either he may have joined by some other name.
I am told by Dr. Narendra that he has joined, Dr. Pradeep Reddy.
But list is not showing.
Maybe by some other name he might have joined. Dr. Pradeep, Dr. Narendra. Dr. Narendra, can you tell whether Dr. Pradeep Reddy has joined or not? Okay, then we have Dr. Yogendra Malik with us. Dr. Yogendra Malik.
He is raising his hand, but I think he is not getting unmuted. ये pediatric group
yes,
को
yes.
unmute करिए.
Doctor, yes,
He is
somebody
in the name of
by
pediatric
Dr.
group.
Naresh. Please unmute. We find Dr. Naresh is raising the hand.
Okay, this is Pradeep Reddy. Sorry, I think, can you hear me?
Dr. Pradeep, you are unmuted. You can now speak.
Thank you. Sorry.
You have to unmute yourself. Admin has allowed you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Pradeep Reddy. I'm a
Dr. Pradeep Reddy ji, now you can unmute yourself. Dr. Pradeep Reddy ji.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Pradeep Reddy. I'm a pediatrician and a neonatologist from.
Your voice is feeble. I think otherwise we are getting your voice.
Okay.
May we request you to please speak a bit loud, Dr. Pradeep Reddy ji.
Sure. Yeah.
Please speak a bit loud.
Okay, I'm Pradeep Reddy. I'm a pediatrician and a neonatologist from Marion, Illinois. And I wanted to.
Your voice is still very feeble. Can you raise it?
I have raised it to the maximum. Sorry. So I'm a pediatrician and a neonatologist from Marion, Illinois. I basically wanted to touch base on the challenges that we had with the lack of information that we were getting from government agencies. And even now, one of the biggest problems that we are facing, particularly with India, is to supply oxygen concentrators and other things.
Satish ji ko unmute kar. Satish Swadeshi.
So a lot of efforts are being placed.
Sir, we are able to hear you.
Go ahead.
Yes, please continue.
Okay. Okay. So the number one issue that we were having was a lot of misinformation in the beginning of the pandemic, where there was no centralized communication between the central agencies involved to the rest of the communities. And then the second problem is lack of PPE and other core measures that were needed to contain the disease. Right now, later on, in the later part of the pandemic, the issues that we are facing is regulatory hurdles. For example, when we are trying to ship oxygen concentrators and others, they're sitting in Indian airports for more than weeks without getting the clearance from the customs, and again being charged excise duties and other things, which at this point the government need to waive off, just like they need to waive off the intellectual rights. That's all. You guys carry on. Thank you.
सतीश जी को अनम्यूट कर दो या जो भी वो कॉल करें जिसको. राजा कृष्णमूर्ति ने जो
Yes, I think now we can move on to our next speaker, Dr. Yogendra Malik ji. Dr. Yogendra Malik is All India General Secretary, National Medical Organization. He is related to various programs taken up in Haryana earlier, like Swachhta Abhiyan, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, etc., and is a forerunner in taking up various social service activities in the country, especially in Haryana. May I call upon Dr. Yogendra Malik ji to please address the webinar. Dr. Yogendra Malik ji. Dr. Yogendra Malik, if you are able to hear us, please let me know. Okay, I think there seems to be some technical issues with Dr. Yogendra Malik. May I now request?
वो नहीं दिख रहे हैं अभी. मुझे लगता है सतीश जी, सुंदरम जी, किसी को भी बुला लीजिए. योगेंद्र जी नहीं दिख रहे हैं हमें.
ठीक है. May I now request श्री अरुण देशपांडे जी. श्री अरुण देशपांडे जी.
हाँ जी, हाँ जी,
yes.
yeah.
Shri Arun Deshpande ji is All India General Secretary Grahak Panchayat and is always associated with various rights and issues of the customers, the Grahaks, who is fighting for the cause of the Grahaks so that they get their due, the customers, they get their due whenever they face the market or they face the other systems in the country. Now, may I request Shri Arun Deshpande ji to please address the webinar. Shri Arun Deshpande ji.
Good evening, everybody. I am Arun Deshpande, a consumer activist from Akhil Bharatiya Grahak Panchayat. Thank you for giving opportunity to express my opinion for equitable access to vaccine in the webinar arranged by Gautam Buddha University, Havas University and Association of Indian Universities. We are going through the pandemic of COVID, which is tough and challenging time for all the countries across the globe. All we are fighting some of other front in the challenging time, which could be healthcare, financial aspect, employment, social life, etc. But now it is time we certainly need to come together to fight back against the pandemic COVID. Looking various ways to tackle this COVID, many our experts mentioned here that vaccination is the key measure to resolve this issue. Vaccination has multiple challenges, definitely, at manufacturing, distributing, and administrating the doses. To cope up this demand, many organizations are working 24/7 to address this bottleneck. Government of India has done extraordinary efforts in this area to tackle vaccination, production, and all. Having said this, there is far complicated issues around licenses and transfer of technology. Most important point is here, right to livelihood, which is acceptable to all. This value is far more than international licenses, policies, right to intellectual property, and all. I would like to draw your attention to food security issue agreed by all member countries in Singapore meet held in 2011. Likewise, this has a clear guideline for fundamental right of food for every citizen. The same way we can certainly achieve same for vaccination too. On concluding note, I wish everybody should get vaccination at earliest and affordable cost. Thank you. Thank you very much for hearing me. Namaste.
Recording in progress.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shri Arun Deshpande ji. Now we move on to the next speaker of the program. We are happy to have with us Shri Satish Kumar ji, who is the Deputy Secretary of Swadeshi Jagran Manch at All India level. Shri Satish Kumar ji is an engineer by profession. We request the audience to please mute yourself. As I was saying, Shri Satish Kumar ji is an engineer by profession, is an engineer by education, and a social worker, a great social worker by his profession. He has expertise in economic affairs, not only economic affairs, but all the relevant current issues that our country faces. At the moment, right in the beginning, Professor Pankaj Mittal told you about the petition that has been signed by more than 2 lakh people and around 1,500 persons of the rank of vice chancellors and equivalent in the country. The brain behind all these kind of moves is Shri Satish Ji. Now, may I request Shri Satish Ji, who is spearheading this particular campaign, wherein he is trying through his organization, Swadeshi Jagran Manch, that not only in our country, not only in India, all the people get vaccination that is easily available, not only easily available at a reasonable cost also, but all the population of the developing world, all the poor people in the world, they have access to the vaccination. Now, may I request Shri Satish Ji to please address the gathering. Shri Satish Ji, please.
नमस्कार। आज इस इंटरनेशनल वेबिनार में बोलते हुए मुझे बड़ी प्रसन्नता हो रही है, क्योंकि ये मानवता की इस समय की सबसे बड़ी जरूरतों में से एक है। अभी विश्व जो इस समय पर कोविड-19 की प्रॉब्लम से जूझ रहा है, उसमें स्वदेशी जागरण मंच और भारत की प्रमुख यूनिवर्सिटीज के वाइस चांसलर्स ने मिलकर ये एक मूवमेंट शुरू किया है, यूनिवर्सल एक्सेस टू वैक्सीन्स एंड मेडिसिन्स, और ये इस समय पर वर्ल्ड वाइड हो गया है। भारत में 3 लाख लोगों से अधिक लोगों ने अभी तक कल रात्रि तक इसकी पेटिशन पर साइन किए हैं, और मोर देन 1500 सीनियर हमारे वाइस चांसलर, अदर एकेडमिशियन और शिक्षाविदों ने, जस्टिस, कुछ आर्मी के एक्स जनरल्स, उन लोगों ने इस याचिका पर हस्ताक्षर किए हैं, और विश्व के 20 देशों से लगभग 3000 लोगों ने भी इस पर हस्ताक्षर अभी तक किए हैं। और ये केवल यूनिवर्सल एक्सेस टू वैक्सीन एंड मेडिसिन्स युवम का केवल कैंपेन नहीं है। बांग्लादेश के नोबलिस्ट मोहम्मद यूनुस, उन्होंने भी इस कैंपेन को सहयोग किया हुआ है अपने डिफरेंट नाम से, अपने डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से, और वर्ल्ड वाइड मोर देन 20 लाख लोगों ने इसके लिए पेटिशन साइन किया है। और पिछले अक्टूबर में जब गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने और साउथ अफ्रीकन गवर्नमेंट के साथ WTO में इसके लिए मूव किया, उस समय पर दुनिया की किसी भी गवर्नमेंट ने अथवा इंडिविजुअल ने इस पेटिशन को समर्थन नहीं दिया था। लेकिन पिछले 6 महीने से संपूर्ण दुनिया के मानवतावादियों ने, भारत के राष्ट्रवादियों ने, संपूर्ण दुनिया में अलग अलग लेवल पर पैरेलल काम कर रहे स्वदेशी थिंकर्स ने जब इस विषय में सोचा और उन्होंने इसको एक कैंपेन बनाया, तो मुझे बताते हुए आप सब लोगों को बहुत प्रसन्नता हो रही है कि इस समय पर विश्व में साधारणतया इसके बारे में एक जनमत बन गया है।
Satish ji, can I interrupt you? This is Narendra Rustigi. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy has been waiting. There was some confusion and he has to leave in 5 minutes. So can we interrupt you?
Okay, please allow him. Please allow. I am stopping here.
Okay.
Please allow him.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. He is the champion who can speak more on the issue of this webinar, because he has led a $20 billion bill in the US Congress for eradicating COVID. So with that, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy.
Thank you so much, Narendraji. This is Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. It's so nice to be with you. It's so nice to come someplace they can pronounce your name properly. And so it's a pleasure to be with you. I'll keep my remarks very brief. I'd like to observe those 3 rules of public speaking: be short, be sweet, and be gone. And so I'll just make a couple quick points. First of all, I hope that all of you are safe and healthy, and your families are safe and healthy. Thank you to Howard University and Narendra Rustagi for organizing today's event. I've been doing everything I can to get the Biden administration to provide excess vaccines that we are not using in the United States for the use of India, and I will continue to do so. I made a call on them to share portions of our 80 million excess vaccine doses. They responded favorably, but I'm now proposing something even bigger. I am calling for the NOVID Act. No more COVID, NOVID. It stands for Neutralizing Opportunities for Variants to Infect and Decimate, NOVID. It would stand up a US program to vaccinate 60% of the world's population. It's very important that we make sure that 60% or we reach herd immunity in India and other countries, not only because it's the right thing to do, not only because it is the right thing to do out of compassion and morality, but it's the smart thing to do. Because if we don't do that, variants from all other countries will come back to harm everyone in the United States. And so we must stand up this program and help everybody everywhere, because COVID anywhere is a threat to everyone everywhere. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your participation. Let us do everything we can to rush vaccines and assistance to India. Let us enact my NOVID Act, no more COVID, NOVID, and let us make sure that everyone in the world is free of COVID. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Krishnamurthy. Your NOVID Act would help the world and the US get rid of the virus. Thank you very much for your comments. Excellent. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy, and thank you, Narendra Rustagi ji, for helping us in between. As it was not possible for us.
We had this confusion of letting
ladies and gentlemen, it was Honorable Congressman Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy. He is member of the US House of Representatives from Illinois 8th District since 2017, member of the Democratic Party, and serves on the House Oversight Committee and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence as well. So we were really happy to have his address for this webinar. Now I request Shri Satish ji to please continue with his address. Shri Satish ji, please. I think Shri Satish ji is able to hear me.
आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी,
अच्छे से आ रही है।
Yes.
ठीक है, धन्यवाद राजा कृष्णमूर्ति हमारे उसमें आए। तो पहले बात चल रही थी कि जिस समय हमने स्टार्ट किया ये मूवमेंट, उस समय पर विश्व में कोई भी इस मूवमेंट के पेटेंट फ्री वैक्सीन मूवमेंट के समर्थन में नहीं आया था। बट एज ऑफ नाउ, और स्पेशली अमेरिका, यूएस, उन्होंने भारत के इस पेटेंट फ्री मूवमेंट को और समर्थन दिया है। और अभी जो हमने नेक्स्ट गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने नेक्स्ट मूव की है, उसमें 3 साल के लिए देयर इज ए कंसेंसस इन WTO नाउ, इमर्जिंग कंसेंसस, दैट देयर शुड बी ए पेटेंट वेवर and also technology transfer and other facilitations कि 3 साल के लिए कोविड की वैक्सीन को पेटेंट फ्री और एक्सेसिबल टू ऑल कर दिया जाए। इतना ही नहीं, यूरोपियन यूनियन ने इस मूवमेंट के लिए, पेटेंट फ्री वैक्सीन के लिए और रेजोल्यूशन पास कर दिया है। ये हालांकि शुरू में वो समर्थन नहीं कर रहे थे। इवन वेरी अपोनेंट चाइना, इवन जर्मनी आर नाउ सीम्स टू बी एग्री, अभी वो भी सहमत हो गए हैं। और बिकॉज द प्रेशर हैज बीन बिल्ड अप, इसलिए इवन बिल गेट्स हु वाज वन से पेटेंट के बारे में बहुत आग्रही थे, एंड और वो सोचते थे कि ना पेटेंट फ्री करने से वैक्सीनेशन के प्रोग्राम को हर्ट होगा, यानी अपोजिट थॉट प्रोसेस के थे। किंतु अभी उन्होंने भी फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी दिखाई है और इवन बिल गेट्स और उनका फाउंडेशन भी अब एक्सेसिबल टू ऑल एंड पेटेंट फ्री कर सकते हैं, इसके बारे में उनके कुछ कमेंट्स और बयान आए हैं। इस समय पर 200 से अधिक नोबल जिनको मिले हैं और पूर्व स्टेट्स हेड्स, उन लोगों ने भी इस सारी मुहिम को समर्थन दिया है। मैं ये जानकारी केवल इसलिए दे रहा हूं कि पिछले 6 महीने के अंदर when we started from the zero support, now it is the general consensus, may be it governments, individuals, organizations, Oxfam to our Swadeshi Jagan Manch, because इस आइडिया में ये सत्य के ऊपर आधारित विचार है कि पूरी मानवता बचनी चाहिए। विश्व ने, प्रकृति ने, परमात्मा ने इस मानवता को, इस विश्व को अभी बहुत आगे ले जाने का विचार है किया हुआ है। इसलिए इस विषय पर सबको कंसेंसस पे आना, ये एक नेचुरल सी प्रक्रिया जो है विश्व भर में हुई है। स्वदेशी जागरण मंच ने भारत के अंदर इसके लिए लीड किया है और हमारे कुलपतियों ने, हमारे उन्होंने जिन्होंने आज ये प्रोग्राम भी आयोजित कर रहे हैं, उन लोगों ने भी इस विषय में बहुत बड़ा सहभाग किया है। और मैंने पहले भी बताया है कि 1500 से अधिक उच्च शिक्षाविदों ने हस्ताक्षर करके और इस मुहिम को समर्थन दिया है। और हमें लगता है कि ना केवल वैक्सीन के मामले में और बल्कि उसकी दवाइयों के मामले में भी इस विषय में इन कंपनियों ने आगे आना चाहिए। भारत का जहां तक सवाल है, भारत ने अपने यहाँ पर, भारत बायोटेक ने ICMR के साथ, फार्मूला के साथ जो कर रहे थे, उन्होंने ना केवल इंडियन कंपनीज को बल्कि फॉरेन बेस्ड कंपनियों को भी लाइसेंसिंग, वॉलंटरी लाइसेंस दे दिया है। और अब भारत में दिसंबर तक हम अपनी मोर देन 75% पॉपुलेशन को, विच इज एक्चुअली रिक्वायर्ड टू फिनिश दिस कोविड प्रॉब्लम, वो 75% प्लस को हम लोग वैक्सीनेशन कर लेंगे। ऐसा हमारे को अभी तक के हमारा जो प्रोडक्शन सिस्टम है, हमारी सप्लाई चेन्स हैं, हमारे जो इस समय पर सिस्टम बन गए हैं, तो उसमें हमारे को लग रहा है। बट वी आर डूइंग फॉर द वर्क ऑफ टोटल ह्यूमैनिटी। विश्व के 785 करोड़ पॉपुलेशन को वैक्सीनेशन करना, ये युवम कैंपेन का अंतिम लक्ष्य है। और मैं समझता हूं कि इसके लिए हमारे को अगले दिनों में व्यापक सफलता भी मिलेगी। और ना केवल अभी केवल टेक्निकल लेवल पर अलाउ हुआ है, बट उसका फैसिलिटेशन करना, रॉ मटेरियल की अवेलेबिलिटी, टेक्निकल नॉलेज, पासपोर्ट्स और ट्रेड सीक्रेट्स, ये सब भी पास करते हुए, और ये जो बड़े कॉरपोरेशंस हैं और मल्टीनेशनल्स हैं, वो भी इसको फैसिलिटेट करेंगे, बिकॉज वो भी समझ रहे हैं कि इस समय पर सारी दुनिया के अंदर इस प्रकार की एक पॉपुलर डिमांड जो है ये हो गई है, उनके भी हित में है। बिकॉज लंबे समय में प्रोफेसर नरेंद्र रस्तोगी वाज आल्सो टॉकिंग विन-विन सिचुएशन। हालांकि भारतीय चिंतन के में तो इसको औषधि को सेवा का क्षेत्र माना गया है, बट इफ वी थिंक अबाउट द वेस्ट आल्सो, वेस्ट आइडियाज आल्सो, इवन देन इट इज द विन विन सिचुएशन इफ दे अलाउ फॉर द पेटेंट फ्री वैक्सीन। तो इसलिए उन सब लोगों को भी जो इस समय अब समर्थन देने को आ गए हैं और अभी जो फेंस सीटर हैं अभी सोच रहे हैं, खासकर कॉर्पोरेशंस, बिग कॉर्पोरेशंस, और वो भी अगले कुछ दिनों में मुझे लगता है कि विश्व जनमत की आवाज सुनेंगे और हम सब लोग जल्दी से ही इस वैक्सीन को सभी 785 करोड़ लोगों को वैक्सीनेशन करते हुए विश्व को इस बीमारी से अगले 6-8 महीनों में मुक्त होता देखेंगे। ऐसा एक विश्वास इस सारी की आप सब लोगों के प्रयत्नों को देखते उभर रहा है। मैं आप सब लोगों को और शुभकामनाएं भी देता हूं, जो इस सेमिनार के वेबिनार के आयोजक हैं उनको भी, और कि अगले दिनों में उनके जो प्रयत्न हैं वो निश्चित रूप से। इसी शुभकामनाओं के साथ मैं अपनी बात पूरी करता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद श्रीमान शीश जी। Now we move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Yogendra Malik. Here we could not locate him because he is joined with some different name, and he was not able to unmute himself. So now may I request Dr. Yogendra Malik to please address the gathering.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me, Shri Bhagwati ji and Professor Sachdeva. I'm Professor Malik, and right now I'm member of National Medical Commission, which governs the medical education of Government of India. Now, regarding this question, we were thunderstruck by a new virus. Maybe in December 2019, and it came to India. And there was already a debate going on after 95 trips and gets agreement, and which was a kind of taken forward in a Supreme Court judgment of 2013 of Novartis versus Union of India in the form of SLP. But that virus again allowed us to bring forth this new debate of equitable distribution of medicines as well as vaccine. Why this is important? Because obviously there are many factors. We are applying multi-pronged strategy to contain this virus. But one thing which is looking very promising is vaccine. And with the advancement of the technology, we are looking that within a year, which is quite unusual, because if you go through the documents of WHO, they said you cannot have a vaccine before 1.5 years. But within a year, we had about 8 candidates in the world. And you know about Pfizer, Moderna, Novavax, Johnson & Johnson, Gamaleya, and AstraZeneca. So, and obviously we cannot miss Serum Institute of India as well as our own Bharat Biotech. So, a question arose that how much vaccine we need. The WHO DG, he said, the world now has capacity of only producing 3.5 billion doses. And even if we go by the 70% idea of having a herd immunity, then in the 7 billion population of the world will at least need 10 billion doses of the vaccine. So when we need that sort of the quantity of the vaccine, and if we can produce only 3.5 billion, that corollary, it means that only rich countries of this world will be able to afford it. Now, having said that, there was a very good opportunity in October 2020 that India and South Africa availed in the WTO meetings of waiving for provision of these trips, which is very important, and rightly said by the earlier speaker, Manya Satish ji, that it has gathered a momentum, and fortunately, most of the countries, including America and all, they have agreed for this. Now, if we waiver this, it will allow faster technology transfer and production of vaccine in countries that have production capacity. Now, coming to what capacity India has, we have 7 capable vaccine manufacturer in India. SI, Bharat Biotech, Panacea Biotech, Sanofi, Senta Biotech, Biological E, Hester Biosciences, and Zydus Cadila. So they are capable of manufacturing 8.2 billion doses, one of the reports said. So if this, I think if the world agrees, and most of them, they've already agreed, then this transfer of vaccine can be very easy, and it can help us to get through this COVID pandemic. Obviously, I know that patent, they foster innovation, and they give by giving temporary monopoly to the innovator. But this is an extraordinary situation, and rightly pointed out by one of the speaker, that if only the developed countries got vaccinated and the underdeveloped world is not vaccinated, there are chances of virus mutation and the infection again going to the developed countries. So we can be safe only when the whole world is safe. So we have to go by what we call Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the whole world is a family, and like a family, we have to behave. As a doctor, I can tell you, in the ethics regulation for the doctors, we have already incorporated in the section 6.2 that patent and copyrights of physician may patent surgical instrument and appliances and medicine, or copyright application methods and procedure. However, it shall be unethical if the benefit of such patent or copyrights are not made available in the situation where interest of large population is involved. I think it's not the large population, the whole population of the world now is involved, and it's impedient on all of us that we get all the countries agree to the transfer of the technology as well as transportation of the vaccine. And India is capable of producing so many vaccines for the world as well as the whole humanity. So I request all the delegates to mount some kind of pressure on the governments all over India. That's what I had to say. I hope and I'm sure that soon these things will be there on the board on most of the countries' heads, and the whole population of the world will be benefited by vaccinations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yogendra Malik ji, for your very enlightening presentation to us. We move next in the program. We have with us
Pradeep Kapoor has joined if you want him to.
Okay. We are happy to have with us His Excellency, former Ambassador, esteemed Professor Pradeep Kumar Kapoor. He is a visiting clinical professor, international trade, development and security issues at the School of Public Policy, University of Maryland, and electrical engineer from IIT Delhi. He is the author of the Amazon bestsellers book, Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic, Envisioning a Better World by Transforming the Future of Healthcare. He received the 2020 Indo-American Press Club Excellence in Literature Award and 2020 Raymond Aron Group Award for his latest book, Health for All. May I request now Mr. Kapoor to please enrich us with his varied experience. Mr.
Thank
Kapoor,
you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Saab, Professor Somnath Sachdevji. And thank you to Professor Narendra Rastogi Saab also for inviting me for this webinar. I am sorry I missed the initial discussions because I was on some other calls till a few minutes back. And I am sure you have already discussed a lot of important things, and there is not much that I may be able to add to this very distinguished gathering of senior academicians and doctors and practitioners and others. But what I heard the last few minutes only, and I could see that it is going along the right sort of track for the discussion, that we have to think of this, coronavirus as a global phenomena. It is not respecting any boundaries. The geographies are unknown to coronavirus. As we wrote in our book, which is on Beyond COVID, that after the Second World War, there has been no such catastrophe in the world which has impacted such a great number of people in all the countries of the world. The World War II didn't have so much impact in the sense that there were countries which were frontline states which were fighting. The population in those countries, were not involved directly in the fighting on the frontier, on the borders. The military was involved, the Navy was involved, the Army, Air Force were involved. The population was supporting the war efforts, and they were getting impacted through the bombardment, through scarcities, through economic hardships, through hiding in the subways and in the bunkers when the air raids would take place, through lack of access to their daily routine, daily activities, daily enjoyment, daily entertainment. So there was curtailment of that in those countries only which were directly involved in the World War. Here the impact is on every individual in every country. No individual is safe. If the leader of the most powerful country in the world, which is the US, he has also got coronavirus. So it shows that with the amount of resources which are available to you, amount of weapons which are available to you, amount of facilities which are available to you, you are still not immune to coronavirus. So first, we have to understand this aspect, that nobody is immune. Second aspect we have to understand is that the mutations are taking place, variants are happening. So even with vaccines, you have fast forwarded the vaccines. You have made them available to the developed world only primarily in terms of the mass access to the mass populations. It is not yet available to more than 90% of Africa, for example, or Latin America or South Asia, or the other developing countries or least developed countries of the world. So there is a lot of inequity because of your money and your capacity. But that aspect which has already been discussed, that it is not going to respect any sort of limitations of geography or space, that will multiply, and no country will be safe from the variants. Now, sitting in the US in Washington DC, I may think I'm comparatively safer. Yes, I'm comparatively safer for the time being. But when the variants enter again in a big way, and these vaccines which have given me immunity for a certain period of time are no longer effective, again I'm not safe. So to prevent multiple waves and layers of coronavirus happening again and again, the world has to act as one, understanding that the problem is impacting the whole world. And for any government in the world to say that they are capable of dealing with this crisis or with this pandemic is not a correct statement, because no government by itself, with whatever resources it may have at its command, can deal with this pandemic on its own. Leaders in the world who are able to communicate effectively with the civil society, with the citizens regularly, and through social media and through all sorts of platforms, are better able to manage it compared to leaders in the world who may think that they have the capacity and resources to deal with it. So this is some lot of learnings for the future. In the book which was mentioned, when I was introduced also, we have written so many different steps that the world needs to undertake, because after 1918 Spanish flu, there has been no pandemic of this scope and this scale. But now that it has happened in 2019, 2020, 2021, it is not a question of if such a thing will happen again. It is only a question of when such a pandemic will happen again. And also, not just a pandemic, with the climate change, natural disasters of a scale which have not been seen before can happen. And Beyond that, bioterrorism warfare, if this is one already being experimented, then the people who are experimenting with this bioterrorism warfare will feel more encouraged to experiment even further, to manipulate the weaknesses and to make countries weak so that they are able to advance their agenda. And if it is not one, it sets out the template for bioterrorism warfare for the world. So it is a no-brainer. Any country which has the goodwill and the health benefits of the world in their minds and hearts cannot but act in a responsible manner, in a collaborative manner, in a cooperative manner, for their own safety and for the safety of the world and for the future of the world. I will stop here with my initial opening statement and the premise which I've laid out. And I was told by Professor Rastogi that we'll have question answers. So I look forward to that. Thank you very much. Namaste. And so good to see all of you. And thank you for organizing this very useful topical webinar.
Thank you, Professor Kapoor ji. If anyone has a question, then you may please unmute yourself and ask.
क्वेश्चन लास्ट में रख लीजिए सोमनाथ जी, अभी बोल नहीं है क्वेश्चंस, एक बार स्पीकर्स को बुलवा लीजिए.
If Professor Kapoor ji is available till the last, then that will be better.
मुझे लगता है क्वेश्चन आंसर बाद में ही रखिए.
Okay.
I will continue.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next with us we have Shri R. Sundaram ji. He is by profession a chartered accountant, a very renowned social worker in the sense that he is all India convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch. I already told you, Swadeshi Jagran Manch is the organization that is spearheading this campaign of having universal access to vaccines and medicines in the country, not only in the country, but we are trying to take it beyond the borders of the country as well. Now, may I request Shri R. Sundaram ji to please address us with these valuable views.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somnath ji. I am very happy and delighted to participate in this landmark global event. It is beautifully titled Strategies for Dealing with Pandemic for Equitable Access to Medicines. Many luminaries are participating in this meet, and I am fortunate, like many of you, to listen to their great experience and advice. It's being organized by Gautam Buddha University in association with Harvard University and Association of Indian Universities with many other knowledge partners. Now here I should mention a word of thanks to Dr. Raja Krishnamurthy, the Senator. He has given us hope by coining a new word, Novid. He walked the talk. He was sure, he was sweet, and he left at the earliest. Anyway, on behalf of all of you, I take this opportunity to thank him for the elaborate plans he has made, not only for the Americans, but also for the entire world, and for giving us some confidence. COVID-19 is devastating the whole world. If one part of the country or one part of the society was affected, the rest of the society will move for succor. But today, nobody is spared. As has been rightly pointed out by the previous speaker,
It has affected the man right on the street to Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America. We don't know what battle we are going to face tomorrow. We are not only to battle the urgent issues, but also the emergent issues. Considering the magnitude of the problem, we all feel that concerted effort by every section of the society is needed to combat and win over this pandemic. My word of caution as a chartered accountant to the business community: this is not the time to look at revenues or profit, especially by pharma industry. If by coming out of this COVID, and we are going to see a healthy society in the next 2 or 3 years, the industry and especially the pharma industry can have that time. But today, a concerted effort by the entire pharmaceutical chain is required to provide not only vaccines and the medicals. No. We should not create barriers for timely access to affordable medical products, including vaccines. Universal access to vaccine is the need of the hour, and our campaign has been rightly worded. Now, initiated by the Africa and India in October, now more or less a global consensus is emerging as regards the TRIPS waivers are concerned. Hope this pandemic will unite the world so that we can all come together and free ourselves from this pandemic called COVID. Many people are cautioning us about the events to unfold in the coming days. But I pray to God that normalcy should be restored at the earliest. Finally, my request to WTO. World Trade Organization is an institution created by us. The rules have been framed by us. So there should not be any hesitation to dismantle the rules if it comes in the way of providing vaccines or medicines. So the world should not wait till December 2021 for waiver of patents. Unusual times call for innovative solutions. So the WTO and the whole world community should look at how these patent waivers can be granted at the earliest, if possible tomorrow, so that access to medicine is available to all. I congratulate every one of the organizers for conducting this very important and timely event. Hope, I am sure, this will lead to the elimination of COVID, and this is our wish. Thank you very much, one and all.
Thank you very much, Shri Sundaramji, for your very enlightening talk. We move next in the program. The main organizer of this webinar, Professor Bhagwati Prakashji. He is Vice Chancellor, Gautam Buddha University, Greater Noida, and is an authority on the matters related to General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, any issues related with TRIPS, that is trade-related intellectual property rights, and whenever India has to participate in WTO on any issue, we always look forward to the guidance of Professor Bhagwati Prakash Sharma ji. He has already represented the country in WTO meetings on many occasions outside. He has written several books and is a well-known, renowned academician in this field. May I now request Professor Bhagwati Prakash ji to please deliver his address.
Thank you, Professor Somnath ji. Esteemed galaxy of academic, professional, and practicing luminaries. It gives me immense pleasure to have these deliberations about the cause of concern for the entire global humanity. Right to life is a universal fundamental right. Even Indian Constitution and constitutions of most of the countries, democratic countries, grant this right. And therefore, right of profiteering of an innovator cannot supersede over the right to life. And as Professor Narendra also outlined, that 6 vaccine developers in US were given $12 billion. In UK also, it was the government which has funded the research. In India also. And therefore, it was just contract research to develop the vaccines. And therefore, I think the knowledge lies in the public domain already. However, we have been talking of making medicines and vaccines patent-free on the platform of the World Trade Organization. But world cannot wait till WTO arrives at a conclusion. The entire global humanity is facing a threat of infection and imminent death. Almost more than 17 crore 170 million people across the world and 28 million persons in India are infected. And when and already funeral grounds and cremation grounds, they are. And even at this moment, if the companies think of their profits and do not share the technical know-how, do not augment the supply of downstream value chain of manufacturing ingredients, and they just care for their profits, I think it appears like there are some people who intend to become the merchants of the death. Because medicines are there which can cure these 17 crore people who are infected across the world. And vaccines are there to immune everybody from infection. Already the 6 countries, including Israel, US, UK, etc., they are now safe. And another important thing is that in the agreement on trade-related intellectual property rights of the WTO, Clause 7 categorically mentions about the transfer of technology. It says, चूंकि ऑडियंस हिंदी में भी काफी लोग कन्वर्सेंट ज्यादा हैं और इंडिया से, इसलिए I'll just be being bilingual. So, एग्रीमेंट ऑन ट्रिप्स में टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर की स्पष्ट कहा गया है कि दी ऑब्जेक्टिव जो है इसका नवाचार यानी इनोवेशंस को प्रमोट करना भी है और उन इनोवेशंस का सोसाइटी बेनिफिट ले सके इसके लिए उस टेक्नोलॉजी को ट्रांसफर करना भी है. Or it has also been categorically mentioned in clause 7 of the agreement on TRIPS that the developed countries or industrialized countries shall ensure that the companies from industrialized countries transfer the technology to the developing countries, and therefore I think this is an explicit statutory duty of the companies and the nations which are standing in between making the vaccines patent free. It is their duty that they should relieve this. Another important thing, I think, we have launched this universal access to vaccines and medicines campaign, and large number of people are signatory over it. कि 2001 में जब सारे कंट्रीज यूनाइट हो गए थे WTO की दोहा कॉन्फ्रेंस में, So I think in the 50 years history of the GATT and WTO, it was for the first time, पहली बार हुआ कि उस कॉन्फ्रेंस के फर्स्ट डे एक सप्लीमेंट्री डिक्लेरेशन पास करना पड़ा to make to give the right of compulsory license to the developing countries. And there was also a struggle. Actually, the AIDS was very rampant in the Africa and Latin America, etc. And medicines of AIDS were so costly. At the time, the cost of per patient treatment was $15,000. और इंडियन कंपनीज ने उन दवाइयों को $1 a day में ट्रीटमेंट हो जाए इस तरह की ऑफर की. And then some of the American companies, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, obtained a stay from the Supreme Court in Cape Town in South Africa. And even the US government had filed a case against Brazil, which has enacted a law of compulsory license in the dispute settlement. Now, since Indian companies were ready to supply the medicine, and the South African government and Brazilian government had enacted a law of compulsory license for parallel imports. And when people felt that the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association has obtained a stay, so in the Cape Town, people launched a very aggressive agitation, and they had a protest march from Supreme Court to US Embassy. And ultimately, the companies were so frightened that they withdrew that case from the South African Supreme Court, and they reduced the prices by 90%. And meanwhile, the US government also withdrew the case from the dispute settlement body of the WTO. And therefore, what do I feel that today global humanity has to unite against the unconscionable right of patent holder. Even I would like to say that if somebody has invented something, can he have 20 years monopoly against the entire 7.8 billion global humanity, that no other manufacturer shall have right to manufacture those medicines or vaccines for another 20 years because the first invention was made by them? How is it possible? And therefore, I think we have also to address the present regime of the intellectual property. And that has to be made more humanitarian. I think कुछ examples जैसे मैं आपके सामने ये भी रखना चाहता हूँ. आज ब्लड कैंसर की मेडिसिन इमेंटिन बीटा क्लोराइड जो नोवार्टिस ग्लिवेक के नाम से बेचती है 1200 rupees per tablet. Indian companies are manufacturing and selling it for 90 rupees. When liver and kidney cancer drug Nexavar was being sold for 2,80,000 rupees per vial of 50 ml. At the time, Natco, an Indian company, applied for compulsory license and got it, and they are paying 6% royalty to the original inventor Bayer AG, and they are selling it for 8,800 rupees. And therefore, in the entire world, पूरी दुनिया में जो 2,80,000 रुपए का लिवर किडनी का कैंसर का इंजेक्शन है, वो हिंदुस्तान की नेटको कंपनी अगर 8,800 रुपए में बना 8,800 रुपीस में बनाकर बेच रही है, and they are paying 6% royalty to the original inventor. मुझे लगता है कि this is the solution, that first inventor can have his right, but either he should offer voluntary license to all those who are desirous to manufacture, or the first inventor may be given some 5% or 7% royalty to reimburse his expenditure on research, and subsequent manufacturer should be allowed. But in this case, neither compulsory license is possible because most of the companies do not have the technology, raw material, genetic material resources, and therefore it is the duty of all those patent holders to put this knowledge in public domain and make the knowledge available to all those companies which are desirous to manufacture these medicines and vaccines. And they should also augment the supply of downstream value chain of the ingredients. And as I have said, world cannot wait, and therefore it should come the next moment. And I think this is our first step. and we should unite and we should facilitate organization of the entire global humanity to put pressure upon all those patent holders and all those ingredient suppliers that they put it in public domain. And we have to ensure that every living being who is born on this planet has a right to medicines and vaccines which are there and which are beyond their purchasing power or which are not available due to limited supply. And therefore, the supply should also be augmented, and simultaneously, the prices should also be brought at reasonable limit. And even WHO and various other international agencies have also been trying that if a global fund has to be created, then I think, for example, government of India is vaccinating the population free of cost. And already Indian company Bharat Biotech has transferred the technology to 3 Indian manufacturers, and they are ready to transfer technology to any company, whoever applies from anywhere in the world. And condition is that 50% of those injections should be supplied in India. And therefore, to make the global humanity safe from this deadly disease, I think the company should relinquish their monopoly right of unconscionable profiteering, and the global humanity should breathe in the free air. And when 6 countries have already unmasked their population by vaccinating majority of the adult population, this has to be done. Otherwise, there are countries who have not seen a single vaccine. There are 36 countries where this infection rate is growing. And therefore, I think this is the duty of the global humanity to rise and unite and compel all those stakeholders who are obstructing the free access of vaccines and medicines. And I think we sometimes have to think that post-COVID, how to redesign the economy, how to reconstruct the economy, that would be another challenge. And already people are losing jobs, incomes are dwindling, and therefore we have to think comprehensively. With this, I convey my thanks to Professor Narendra Rustagi, who was instrumental in organizing this event, and all the esteemed dignitaries who have addressed this gathering. And on top of all, I am highly grateful to all those people who have joined this webinar. So I convey my thanks, and I invite everybody to sign on the petition, which is online petition, which is being circulated for universal access to vaccines and medicines. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Professor Bhagwati ji, for your very enriching talk for all of us. Now may I ask our
Ron Somers have also joined. So
yes, that is what I wanted to know. So thank you very much for the same. We are happy to have with us now respected Ron Somers. He is former chairman, US-India Business Council. He played a lead role in coordinating the passage of the India-United States Civil Nuclear Agreement. He is founder and CEO of India First Group. Ron Somerji, your role in assisting Gilead Sciences in the voluntary licensing of remdesivir injection in India back in May 2020 had been very inspiring. Now, may I request you to please enlighten us all on this issue of COVID-19, and especially your endeavors that you made for this voluntary licensing of remdesivir.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you all. And let me just jump right in after what Professor Bhagwati was discussing. When you have something that is a cure for hepatitis, as in the case of hepatitis C, and the product that Gilead Sciences has brought to India, you are compelled to treat as many patients that need that medicine as you possibly can reach. It's not an issue of cost, it's an issue of urgency. It's an issue of getting that medical treatment to the people who need it. Gilead Sciences pioneered a voluntary licensing model that is worthy of discussion here, because the same can be applied literally to other therapies, to other vaccines, and even to other technologies. And I think about green technologies, I think about information technologies, in other words, innovation. How do you share information? And the model that Gilead pursued with their cure for hepatitis C, which affects 100 million people in India, not in India, in the world. I mean, just to give you a dynamic of 35 million people in the world have been affected by HIV, and yet every one of us knows about HIV. 35 million people have HIV virus in the world. 100 million people have hepatitis C, so 3 times as many, and then 400 million people have hepatitis B. And we still don't have a cure for that. We do have a treatment, 1 pill a day treatment. The question is, when you have a treatment that works, when you have a cure that works for C, for hepatitis C, how do you get that medicine to the most number of people that you can reach? And the model of voluntary licensing is what Gilead pursued, and I think has proven, which is we were able to come to India and knock on the doors of India's great pharmaceutical industry. And for the hepatitis therapies, they were able to give licenses to 11 Indian companies, all of whom you know. You know their name, they're in your vocabulary. These are the great companies in India. And they were encouraged to compete with one another, not just for the market of India with that license of technology transfer from Gilead to these companies, not just the market of India, but 126 other countries, meaning half the world's population. That's a huge market. So Gilead was able to transfer their technology to these 11 companies in a contractual license. There was a small royalty requested of Gilead of 5%, which Gilead would then invest back into the access program to help these same companies achieve regulatory approval in the 126 other countries beyond India. And effectively, these companies competed with one another, the 11 of them, and drove the pricing of the medicine down to the floor, to the point where you can now have a treatment for hepatitis C, 1 pill a day, 12 weeks, and achieve a cure for hepatitis C for the cost of less than $150 US. And if you are a family member in India with a member of the family that has hepatitis C, which is eventually going to lead to more illness and ultimately liver cancer and death, you can clearly raise the $150 as a family to treat that patient and achieve a cure. And now I'm pleased to say, with the licensing program underway in India on hepatitis C, more than 1 million people in India alone have achieved the cure just in the last 2.5 years. This is the voluntary license. You take the secret sauce, the innovation, you transfer all that technology to companies that are reputable. They have to achieve their regulatory approval in their country, but they have the market to their country and 126 other countries around the world. And you name any of these other countries, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. These are huge markets for these Indian companies. They compete with one another, and in that competition, they drive the pricing of the therapy to the floor, enabling patient access, which is the goal. The goal is to get that treatment to patients who need it most. Now, jump ahead to COVID-19. And remdesivir is on the shelf of Gilead Sciences. It was an experimental drug to try to treat Ebola back when there were Ebola outbreaks in Africa. Ebola is also a coronavirus. The remdesivir didn't work so well against Ebola. That had some positive effect, but not perfect effect. And it was put on the shelf. Come COVID-19, a new virus, a new coronavirus comes, Gilead pulls it off the shelf, and lo and behold, thankfully, it shows promise in the treatment against COVID-19. Gilead then goes to the same team that licensed the hepatitis C and hepatitis B treatments and says, how do we get this COVID-19 antiviral, remdesivir, to as many patients around the world that may need it. And again, the model was the voluntary licensing. Off to India we go. And I have to give credit to Dr. Vijay Raghavan. Professor Vijay Raghavan was in touch with Gilead Sciences. Dr. V.K. Paul was in touch with Gilead Sciences back more than a year ago, back in March of a year ago, asking for remdesivir in India. And what ultimately happened is Gilead licensed remdesivir in May itself, May of 2020, a year ago, this month, licensed 4 Indian companies and then another 3. So 7 companies in all total, including the big names that you all know so well. I mean, these are in our international vocabulary. These are the Indian giants that know how to produce and scale dramatically. And what they were able to do, these Indian companies, is take the technology transfer for remdesivir and find the active pharmaceutical ingredients, which is a complicated API, and scale dramatically to the point where they were able to produce millions of doses every month, starting as early as July of last year, July of 2020. And they were then serving India during first wave of COVID effectively, as well as beginning to disseminate the treatment to these 126 other markets around the world, countries like Indonesia, countries like Brazil, et cetera. These are huge markets that these other companies were trying to pursue. And then, of course, the second wave of COVID hit India just recently. And Narendra Modi had the foresight to say, let's stop any exports of remdesivir and keep it in the country. These same companies are now producing more than 3 million vials of remdesivir a month. And hopefully that's enough scale at this point to protect and to provide medicine and treatment to those patients who need it in India itself. And what is the royalty that Gilead gets from this voluntary license? Nil, not 1 paisa for Gilead, unless one of 2 events happens. Either the pandemic is declared over by WHO, and I don't think we're going to be hearing from WHO for many months, if not years, that the pandemic is over. And or there's a competing therapy in the market that is approved by the US FDA. And there is no such existing therapy yet approved by the FDA in the United States. So right now, these 7 Indian companies, 1 Pakistani company and 1 Egyptian company are producing medicines for their country, as well as these other 126 markets around the world with no royalties going back to Gilead. Gilead basically gave that technology to these 9 companies, 7 in India, 1 in Egypt, and 1 in Pakistan. I would argue that the voluntary licensing model does a couple of things. It enables patient access, which is the primary goal. The second point is it doesn't undermine intellectual property. It doesn't undermine the patent. India has granted 3 patents to remdesivir for Gilead Sciences. But so long as Gilead is enabling patient access through the leveraging of these 7 very dynamic Indian pharmaceutical companies, why do we have to undermine the patent protection? They're actually giving the patent to these 7 Indian companies, 1 Egyptian company and 1 Pakistani company. So it basically enables innovation, protects the patent, but most of all, it enables patient access. And the price of remdesivir in India, if I'm not mistaken, is $40 a vial. And a successful treatment would require 5 days of treatment, if not 6, maybe 5, maybe 6 days of treatment. And you're looking at 6 vials maximum at $40 a vial, $240. That same treatment in the United States would cost, I believe, upwards of $3,000. So my point is patient access, cost effectiveness, competition among the licensees, and full technology transfer, which in my mind is another iteration of collaboration on innovation. Look what happened during Y2K, when the information technology sector in the world awoke to the fact that what's going to happen the day after year 2000? What's going to happen the first day of the new century? 2021. And everybody you remember was in crisis. We were worried about all kinds of viruses, etc. The United States and India came together. They put their information technology industries together, and they sorted out that problem collectively. Similarly, I believe the same is going to be happening in public health. And I think the voluntary licensing model of Gilead Sciences, the way they've attacked HIV, the way they've attacked hepatitis, and now the virus of COVID-19, and how India has played such a remarkable leadership role, I think that should be commended and applauded. And more companies should be following that model. Let me end there. I've made my point. Voluntary licensing can protect the patent and enable patient access. It's been proven in HIV, it's been proven with hepatitis, and now it's been proven with COVID-19.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ron Thomas. Thank you for your very enlightening and enriching message regarding voluntary licensing and how it can help. Thank you very much. Next, we move on to our next speaker, who is Professor Marilyn Sepakale, the chairwoman of Women Ambassadors Foundation. May I now request Professor Marilyn to please deliver her address. Professor Marilyn, please.
Okay.
You have to unmute her.
You have to unmute. Unmute.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I am not a medical doctor. Thank you, Professor Narendra Rustagi, for inviting me. I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not going to go into the technicality of the vaccine distribution. However, I will say this, that the vaccine distribution is extremely important to the world. The vaccine knows, the virus itself knows no race, no geographical boundaries, no gender, no age, and the response to the virus should be commensurate with the virus in order to combat it. We organized recently the 25th Annual Women Ambassadors Conference under the title The Pandemic and Diplomacy. And so as such, we listened to the various women ambassadors who were talking about the progression of the virus in their different countries, and what the cry, if you will, the plea of all these countries was that the vaccine should be as widely distributed as possible and equally distributed among countries, whether the countries would be rich or poor. The issue of patent, if you will, the issue of the nitty-gritty that has to do with money, that has to do with, is not relevant to people on the ground. People on the ground simply need vaccines. And I just want to bring you back, I will be very brief, and I just want to bring you back to the good old days of Marie Curie, for example, or of Charles Drew, when Marie Curie discovered the radium and polonium and developed X-rays, for example. It was a gift to the world. It was a gift to the world, and until today we are using her research, the product of her research, for which she obtained a Nobel Prize. When Charles Drew, our very own Charles Drew from Howard University, discovered the use of plasma to improve the lives or to save the lives of soldiers who were coming back from World War II, it was also a gift to the world. It was a gift to the world that we, until today, use. So I would venture to say that it behooves us to make it as easy as possible for the entire world to have access to these vaccines. As we can see in one particular country, let's take the United States, for example, if a very small amount of people are vaccinated, it endangers the entire population. And what happens at the level of the United States can be applied to the entire world, where when one country that is vaccinated, fully vaccinated, enjoys a certain freedom of movement, that freedom can be quickly curtailed by the fact that other countries are not vaccinated, because it behooves us to make the vaccine as available as possible. And I think this is an instance where humanity can really prevail over profit, over greed, over the pride of holding on very tightly to a patent. So I think that I will limit my comments as such, and I thank you for having invited me.
Thank you, Professor Marilyn. Thank you very much for your very interesting talk. We move next to our esteemed speaker. We have with us Dr. Devi Shetty. Dr. Devi Shetty is a very well-known cardiac surgeon. Dr. Devi Shetty, are you there with us? I'm not able to spot you. Dr. Devi Shetty. If you are with us, please unmute and say yes. We'll come to know.
From Narayan Hridayalaya. If he is same person.
Yes. Dr. Devi Shetty is a very well-known cardiac surgeon of the country, and is the founder of Narayan Hridayalaya in the country, which are known for affordable services to the poor people of the country. Now, may I request Dr. Devi Prakash Shetty to please deliver his address. Dr. Shetty, please. I could notice Dr. Devi Prakash Shetty is there in the audience list. Okay. By the time he responds to
you can call Mr. Srivastav.
Yes.
Doctor from Washington, D.C.
Now may I request Dr. Alok Srivastav
is not available at
Washington. Yes?
Yeah, Alok Srivastav is not available. Thank you.
Alok Srivastav is not available. Okay, fine. Now we can take up certain.
Narendraji, he is visible in the list. I think he must have joined. Alok Srivastav, Washington, D.C.
Alok Srivastav ji.
This is Alok Srivastav. I am a community leader over here, and my background actually is engineering. I studied at IIT and then I did my PhD in engineering. So I'm very honored to be part of this discussion, and very, very interesting discussion. It's very important to us because India's Foreign Minister Jai Shankar ji is in town right now, and a lot of media is covering him. And one of the discussion of his talk will be about the vaccination. So I hope things will work out. And as Raja Krishnamurti ji said, he's also pushing all the Indian origin elected member of the Congress are also pushing for that. So hopefully there is some graceful solution will come out. And I'm very happy the level of discussion, technicality and policy and distribution. So thank you for organizing such a nice webinar. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shri Alok Srivastav ji. Thank you very much. Dr. Bhagwati ji, I think we can take up 2-3 questions quickly. I have received some questions to be asked from Shri Kapoor ji, if the time permits us. So, and if you permit, we can take up these questions.
The audience can put question to any one of the speakers, whomsoever.
I have already received some questions for Professor Pradeep Kumar Kapoor ji. Professor Kapoor, if you are able to hear me, then I'll ask the questions on behalf of the audience. Professor Kapoor, if you can unmute yourself, I'll request the controller of the program to please unmute Professor Kapoor. He had promised he would be.
Invite kar lijiye. थैंक्स के लिए इनवाइट कर लीजिए कुठियाला जी को.
Okay. Dr. Kapoor, basically he had promised that he would be.
कुठियाला जी को इनवाइट कर लीजिए.
Okay, fine.
For Thanksgiving.
Now we are coming close to our session of this webinar. We have with us Professor Brij Kishore Kothiyala ji, who is chairperson of Haryana Higher Education Council and one of the main organizers and brain behind this international webinar. He has always been very inspiring for conducting these kind of programs, especially that are relevant for the social cause as well. Now may I request Professor Kothiyala ji to please address this gathering and also express a vote of thanks on behalf of the organizers. Professor Kothiyala ji, please.
Thank you, Professor Somnath ji. वेबिनार में जुड़े सभी भारतीय लोगों को नमस्कार, अभिनंदन, और all people who have joined from abroad. Hello. Hello. Good morning to all who have joined from abroad. In fact, this webinar is in continuation of the response from the class of Indian intellectuals who wanted to respond to a very critical situation that has arisen not only in our own country, that is Bharat, India, but all over the world. And this response is the continuation of the efforts that we have been making in collaboration with each other, like Swadeshi Jagran Manch, Swadeshi Swalamban Nyas, Gautam Buddha University, Kurukshetra University, Haryana State Higher Education Council. All these people joined hands because like-minded people, they were thinking alike. And everyone felt that this is a situation where perhaps the question of survival of the humanity has arisen for the first time in the recent history. And the choice is either to perish or to be there. And the purpose of this intellectual discourse was to get together and share our thoughts about the strategies that can work for universal vaccination for COVID. Because we all know that this new virus, microorganism, it respects no boundaries. It doesn't recognize any race or age or gender. And as most of the speakers have very adequately stated it, that if the entire humanity is not defended, it is not protected, then it can come in a very, very dangerous mutated form in the countries which might think that they are safe, because it has to, it is going to be infected through contact and the ways and means by which are not at the moment totally and completely comprehended by the humanity, scientists and medicine persons. Now, the only way out is, as has been said, that 60 to 70% of the entire population of the world needs to be protected by vaccination. And for that, we need perhaps 10 billion vaccines, and sooner the better. I think most of the speakers were of the opinion that it has to be sooner than later, because the more delay we do in this implementation of the strategies. And during this discourse, there appears to be a consensus amongst the people who are who spoke and who were listening to it, that it has to be a global action that needs to be taken, and for that perhaps the campaign that in the name of UOM campaign, universal vaccination, universal access to vaccination and medicines, that campaign needs to be strengthened. And to our surprise, we started with very small number of supporters for this campaign, but during last 5-10 days, the number of supporters have risen exponentially, and today we have 2 lakh, more than 2 lakh people who have signed a petition, and from the community of the academicians, the senior leaders in the academic world, more than about 2,000 people have signed the petition. So we are gathering support, and for that, that support needs to work together to design the strategies. And the only strategy that comes out to be is that the vaccination is the way out, and for vaccination, it is essential that a large population of the world is vaccinated, and the producers of the vaccination, there is a mismatch between the production and the distribution of the vaccination, and those who realize that humanity has to either survive or perish, they have to take proactive action. And this consensus that emerges in this very respectable group, and the leading personalities of the world have today shared their vision of how to deal with this, right from the people from politics to policymakers to medical practitioners to academicians and people who have successfully implemented such policies in the past. I think the consensus for a uniform action at various levels, at global level, whether it is WTO, whether it is United Nations, whether these are the developed nations or of the United States and other governments, they have to work together, and there can't be any distinction between the developed and developing world, because developed world's existence is also dependent upon the survival of the developing or the underdeveloped world. I'm reminded of an African concept which prevails in all cultures of Africa, but it is more widely known as a Zulu word called Ubuntu, and that says that I am because you are. So I think in today's situation, we can think that I will be if you are there. Tomorrow, I'll be there. US will be there. European Union will be there. If people in Africa and Asia are there, their survival, it is all interdependent. And what in Indian traditional thought process, it is called the Vasudev Kutumbakam. That is, the entire world is one family. One, they have to be treated as one clan. And when we wish to perceive the entire humanity as one clan, then every member of the clan has to be protected. And perhaps that is the strategy, the philosophy of the strategy that we have to do. And problems of the patent-free regime and the IPR issues and distribution, blockchain distribution, all need to be solved. But the basic thing has to be understood that it is a global problem and everyone has to be looked after. And if that is done, then perhaps to my mind, when we started to plan for this kind of interaction, and we set the objectives for this dialogue has achieved its objective, and we have listened to the galaxy of experts from various fields and the various parts of the world, And I think all those who were either speaking or listening, they are now more confident that the entire world would find a solution to this very serious problem. On behalf of the organizers, I wish to I wish to put on record our gratitude and thanks to all the speakers. Uh, uh, all the speakers are very learned persons, and we are grateful to them that they could spare their time and shared their vision about the issues that were raised. And we are also grateful to the academicians and social workers who participated as listeners. And we are also grateful to the Gautam Buddha University, who was the main organizer of this event, along with the Howard University, where I had the fortune, I had the occasion to spend few days in 2017. Then we are also grateful to Association of Indian Universities and the Kurukshetra University and all other, including the Haryana State Higher Education Council, for collaborating with each other to make this event a learning event for all of us. And we hope, together we hope that this dialogue would be followed by more action and more consensus on how to find the solution to this problem. Uh, uh, I think we should all, we all know it and we all understand it, that alone we are a drop, but together we are a sea. We become a sea, we become a huge ocean. And when we get together, so together we can win. And as nations, I think the nature has created a situation where the nations have realized that they cannot survive if they do not collaborate with, not with the selected groups, but with everyone, with every nation. And with that, I thank you all, the speakers, very respected and honorable speakers, the organizers, the all academicians and practitioners and intellectuals and social activists who participated in this. Special thanks to our mentor, Shri Satish Kumarji, who keeps on guiding us and mentoring us on these activities. Special thanks to him. Thank you so much. Good night. Namaskar. Shubh Ratri.
Now we are coming close to our webinar. Before I request our colleague, Professor Vinay Kapoor Mehraji, who is Vice Chancellor, National Law University, Haryana, I would also like to express our gratitude and sincere thanks to all the organizers, their team members who directly, indirectly helped us in making arrangement for this particular international webinar, especially Professor Kothala ji, Professor Bhagwati ji, and Professor Narendra Rustagi ji from Howard University, and Shriman Satish ji, Shri Sundaram ji, and Shri Kashmiri Lal ji, and all others. So thank you very much all. Now I request Professor Vinay Kapoor Mehra ji to please recite Kalyan Mantra for all of us, so that all people in the world, they remain healthy, they remain disease free. That is the meaning of this mantra. Professor Vinay Kapoor ji, please.
Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhagave. Om
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So my heartfelt thanks to all the dignitaries who have joined from abroad, and Narenji and all the delegates who are present till the end of this webinar. So I convey my deep sense of gratitude to all the esteemed dignitaries who are present here.
I also would like to express my thanks to you, Professor Bhagwati Prasad ji, and obviously Sachdeva ji, and all the whole team that you have put together. Not taking all the time to take all names, but thanks everyone. It's a great team effort, and thank you very much for giving me an opportunity.
Yes, thank you all the participants as well. More than 350, they remained connected with us till the last. So that was a wonderful experience. We started with more than 700, and we had a very great number till the end of the program. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Shubh Ratri, good night, and good day in US. So thank you very much. Thank you all.
Congratulations. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.